Basically, I'm here to talk about the power of trends. That's just a marketing clickbait name for the talk. So let's actually see what we're going to talk about. So as he was saying, I'm a software engineer. And what that means is that I'm designed better to use the left part of my brain. Basically, I'm more of an analytical, mathematical person. But something that happened is that for content marketing and for content strategy, I realized that I had to use actually both parts of my brains, not just the left part, but also the right part. But for that, to explain you why, I need to actually go back to the beginning and tell you a little bit about what is the content story for Auth0. So, like any good story, it starts with a problem. Signups were flat. We were at 1,500 signups a month, and we were flat month over month. And as he was saying before, actually 95% of all of our revenue comes from inbound. And since if we're flat, that's not good. So we were actually tasked on increasing this number, getting actually more signups. So we were really pissed off. It was flat. We couldn't do anything. What should we do? So I'm an engineer. We started doing experiments. We started trying something very small, checking the results. If they worked, we continue. If they didn't, threw it away. So let's start thinking a few ideas. So first idea was, let's write Auth0 related content. So Auth0 is basically a company that helps with authentication for custom apps for developers. So we said, let's try to make some cool examples of how people can actually add authentication for their applications. So we just ran it, and we increased page views 4%, so there were more people coming to our content, but signups were still flat monthly. So we were sad. But we actually had to understand why. So what was going on? Again, left part of the brain, analytical part. We saw that most of the people that came to the blog were returning users. They were already Auth0 users trying to find out some cool stuff that they could do. And the thing is that we loved them coming, but we were looking for lead gen, for acquisition, so they weren't as good for this. So we said, let's try another idea. Let's try to do greenfield content related to Auth0. So Auth0 is about authentication. Let's write about authentication, API security, JSON web tokens, and things like that. So at first, we started thinking about, we want people to just like search on Google and find us somehow. So we were thinking, OK, let's target single sign-on. But if you know a little bit about SEO and the long-tail keywords, short-tail keywords, single sign-on is a really, really hard thing to position yourself. And if you know developers, when I was actually coding authentication, I wasn't searching single sign-on. I was searching my real problem. Authentication in AngularJS. Authentication in React with Active Directory. So we started thinking, OK, let's start writing some of this content. But how can we get ideas to write this content? And we used different things. One of them was Google Trends. So in Google Trends, you can see how words are trending. So React.js, it seems to be trending up. Maybe it's worth writing about it, because people are actually searching about it. We also checked GitHub trending. So in GitHub, you can see for each different language what things are trending. So for example, for JavaScript this week, or this day, or this month, what frameworks were people putting stars or forking? So what were they interested about? The other thing is we checked all of the Asterix weekly. JavaScript weekly, Ruby weekly, .NET weekly, whatever you want weekly, to see what they were getting articles and what people were finding interesting about that. And finally, Twitter. We just followed interesting people on Twitter and see what they were talking about, these influencers or people who know about development and authentication. Something that I have to recommend here, we use an app that's called Nasel, or at least that's how I think it's pronounced. I'm an Argentinian, so I don't know, but it's really good. And how that works is it basically checks for all the people that you follow, which are the links that are more retweeted or fabbed, and give you a sum up every day of what are that content. So we actually started using that tool to find the content. So again, we ran this experiment, and we were actually pretty happy, because when we started running this experiment with a few blog posts, we now started seeing an increase in page views of 10%, and we actually had an increase in signups, 7%. So we basically opened the champagne, and we were, yes, we're doing it. But then, no, we're not doing it. Because if you see what Mike Miller is saying, in order for a company to have a great exit, they need to grow revenue 10% month over month. And in order to grow that, they actually need to grow even more for top of funnel. So 7%, less than 10%, less than more than 10%. So not good. So what did we do? How can we enhance this? How can we make it better? So we put our Sherlock hub, again, using the left analytical part of the brain. And we were thinking, what can we do now? And we started seeing data. So what does this say? Something that we saw is that this shows the conversion rate from an anonymous visitor to sign up, depending on how many page views they had on the blog. So as you can see, if they had 1 page view, it was 0.1%. But if they have 7 page views, they had 9.8%. So we said, I got it. I know what to do. So let's get people to come to the blog. How can we do that? We started doing, for example, blog post series. So we were writing about AngularJS. Every week, new topic on AngularJS. So people knew that if they came every week, they would more content about what they were interested about. We also first did a newsletter, which wasn't really successful because apparently developers hate email. And the problem that I have is now I'm great at Slack, but I suck at email. Like, I don't read my email anymore. So something that ended up working for this is actually push notifications for Chrome and Safari. So they were coming back thanks to that. And then we also had recommended articles. So if you were reading article A, and we think that article B, C, and D are interesting for you, let's actually put that in the right sidebar, and let's actually get people to read that. And even better, we increased even more our page views, and now we increased even more our signups. So again, we were happy, but I don't like not growing. I want to always more. So I thought, how can we enhance this? Sherlock Holmes. So again, analytical part of the brain. Thinking a lot, and what happened? No clue. I don't know what else I can do, but I want to grow. So what can we do at this point? So we started thinking, what are the questions that matter here? And one of the questions is, how can we jump on developer trends? How can we know what developers like? How can we know what developers are talking about? What if there's a new trend? How can we get the new people, the new influencers talking about it to actually talk about our technology and what we were doing? How can we make people aware of the stuff we write? I really like the analogy, which is similar to the trees, that if you write really great quality content, but nobody reads it, you didn't write, well, I was going to say shit, but it's bad. You didn't write anything. So it's actually not useful at all. So how can we make that? And this is the point where we had to change, and instead of using the left side of the brain, we had to actually start using the right side of the brain. So what did we do? What we realized is that maybe it's not just about optimizing analytics. Maybe it's not just about keywords on Google. Maybe it's not just about reading the numbers. And maybe it's also about people. Because after all, people are the ones who make every company. People are the ones who buy your product. People are the ones who use your product. So maybe it's about people. But people, what's that? Mathematical, analytical, who cares about people? I like computers, that's it. But it was actually about people. So we said, I got it now. I know what we can do. And what we started doing is we started to attend the framework conferences to talk about really interesting things for developers. So not about Auth0, but around authentications, JSON Web Tokens, and things like that. And for this, we started researching some of the conferences. So for example, for AngularJS, NGConf and NG Europe, or Angular Connect, are the bigger conference. For React.js, it was ReactConf. Something we needed to do is something like this, which is an event calendar, because something interesting for the conferences is that you need to apply to the CFPs, to the call for papers, long time before if you want to speak at that. So you really have to plan in advance. And for this, we started making a list of what conferences do we want to go, what frameworks do we care about, where should we go, who should go, what can we do to apply there. So once we had this organized, because this is the engineering part, organized process stuff, then we actually started going to conferences to speak. So what were we doing? We were just being honest and genuine. That's it. And we were adding value to devs. Something that is interesting about developers, and something that, at least it happens to me, is I go to a shop to buy clothes, and there's a guy that comes and says, do you want help? No, I'm just looking, thank you. And that's how developers are in everything. There's a sales guy. Hey, can I help you? No, thank you, I'm fine. And then you just walk away. So what we were trying to do here is we were trying to be honest, genuine, and add value to developers. That's it. That's why we were talking about authentication and JSON Web Tokens. So we were talking about how do you authentication to your single page app? Why should you care about single page app? Why do regular web apps don't matter anymore? And one interesting story here is I was at one of the conferences that I spoke, and there was a guy that came and he said, hey, I'm doing like a side project on my own, and I want to add Facebook and Twitter authentication. Should I use Auth0? And my answer was, no. It's a side project. You just want Facebook and Twitter. Auth0 is probably easier than implementing those two, but it's not that hard to put just Facebook and Twitter. And I told him what Auth0 was better for. If you want to have username and password, if you want to have enterprise connections like Active Directory logins and stuff like that. And the guy was really happy. 1.5 years later, we had an inbound lead from a company that this guy worked on, and he said, hey, now I work on a B2B company, and we have a lot of customers that need Active Directory. And that ended up being a deal for 150K ARR. So being open and genuine brought us 150K. That's pretty good. So again, just adding value, trying to be helpful, and then if your product is great, they will like it. They will try it out, and that's it. Because if I'm talking about interesting stuff, they should be interested about what I'm saying. The other interesting thing is that we started to be followed and read by both the developers that spoke and attended these conferences. So something that's nice about a conference usually is that there's a speaker dinner. In the speaker dinner, you go and talk to the other speakers. And if you go to an NGConf, which is about Angular, guess who are the ones who speak? People who are influencers about Angular or people who created Angular. So you start having a relationship with them, and you start talking to them, and they start learning about what you do and who you are. And because of that, they start following you. And therefore, they start reading your content. And because they start reading your content, if they like it, so that's why good quality is key, but if your content is really good, they will start sharing it. So now we had the Angular team or the React team or the Node.js team sharing the articles that we were writing about. So these people that were the speakers there were doing this. And something else is that I like to separate conferences into two. I have the corporate conferences, which are the more enterprisey ones, and then I have the hipster developer conferences, which are these guys that are cool, they like to build cool things, cool samples, and those are the guys that when we speak, we want to target, because those are the guys that all of the rest follow, because everybody wants to be hipster and cool. So we said, OK, it's not just about the speakers, but also these guys who attend this conference are also reading more about us. They are also understanding more about what we do, and they are also increasing our distribution because we had a relationship with people, because we met people, because we went out of my house on my computer, because Auth0 is remote, and I went to talk to other people, and we went to talk to other people. The other thing is that thanks to this, and thanks to the fact that we were trying to help people, we started to be the go-to for questions for authentication. So we don't just answer questions about Auth0, but also about authentication. And that makes you a thought leader. And that's what you want to be, because again, it's about helping people. And if they know that you know about authentication a lot, that means that probably your product is also good for authentication. And even if this lonely developer in his house doing this pet project won't pay a dime, that's fine, because once he goes to work for SAP, they have money, they can pay. And something interesting that also started happening is that now there were a lot of people writing, like there were a lot of people reading our content. So the other good thing that we got from that is that now people wanted to write content for our blog. Because if they wrote on our blog, they knew that a lot of Angular people were going to see it. For example, we just published a blog post about a critical vulnerability for JSON Web Token. And the guy who found it was an Adobe, I think it says Adobe. It was an Adobe engineer. And instead of wanting to publish that in the Adobe blog, he published that in Auth0 blog. Why? Because more people were reading about JSON Web Token authentication and security on our blog. So we built this, which is the guest author program. And what this does is, people can, do you want to write in our blog? Do you want to get seen by millions of people? You can do it, and we actually pay you money. Every person that writes a piece of content for our blog, we pay $200. So you get money, you get distribution, we get content. That was a pretty nice deal for everybody. So again, we were being honest and genuine on what were our intentions. Our people were happy because they were actually writing about this. So that's it. We were doing now we're doing the thing. Now we're growing. And I also love Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. So we actually have even more traffic and more signups. I unfortunately can't share the numbers because these are more recent, but there's a rainbow, so it's better. So now that I explained the story, let's go back to the present, and let's speak about where Auth0 is now. And this is something that is really interesting for me. And there's Alexa and SimilarWeb, which actually check how popular is your site, like what is the traffic for your site. And something interesting for Auth0 is that we are in the top 5,000 websites in the US and in the top 8,000 websites in the world. And even though that doesn't seem like a small number, it seems a really big one, this counts Facebook, Google, this counts Amazon, and we're just a developer company. So to be in the top 5,000 websites in the US, counting all of those and considering that not everybody's a developer here, that was pretty huge for us. And again, the more distribution you have, the more people that read your content, the better the SEO is, the better the distribution is, the better the share is, and it's kind of a snowball that keeps on growing and growing and growing and growing, which is pretty good for us. So the question is, okay, what's next? What else can we do, and what are we working on right now? One of the things is the Auth0 Ambassador program. So you might have heard about Google's GDE, Google Developer Expert, or Microsoft MVP. So why do people want to be a Google GDE? Because of Google brand. Because now I'm a Google Developer Expert. I'm a genius. Google loves me. People want to contact me. We don't have yet that brand, even though we have a popular brand about developers. So again, what did we try to do here? Help people. So we thought there's a lot of people who speak at meetups, and they are great at doing that, and they want to go to the next level and start speaking at conferences. So our program helps those people. We have a program where we talk to them, we help them write abstracts, we help them write call for papers, we help them be better at speakers, we help them train them, and in exchange, only thing we ask for is that they speak about something related to Auth0, so authentication, JSON Web Tokens, API, security, etc., and that they mention that Auth0 is the one who helped them got there. And we also pay for their plane tickets and their hotel to go to the conference if they need, because usually when you're the first speaker, no conference will pay for you. So again, about adding value to people. And also, it was free evangelism for us. This program we're actually kicking off next week. So I don't know how it's going to work. We already have 40 people that applied, but we didn't yet start working with them. So maybe in the next conference, I'll be able to tell you. So something that for me is important is that content distribution is always about good quality content. Because if you don't have good quality content, even if you get great distribution and more people reading it, they will say, this is crap, I don't want to read it, forget it. They won't share it. So good quality content is key. But besides good quality content, content distribution is also about people. And I put myself because it's my quotes, basically. So that's, if there's only one thing that you leave out of my talk, it's this phrase. People, 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 people. People matter. And I'm an engineer, and I'm saying that people matter. Incredible. Thank you.